You're listening to Find the Good News, Episode 40, The Tulips, featuring Susan Riehn. This episode of Find the Good News is sponsored by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. Check out our work at parkerbrandup.com. It's Unwind Wednesday again, and that means it's time for another episode of Find the Good News. As always, thank you for subscribing, liking, sharing, and most important of all, listening to this podcast. The reach of Find the Good News grows with each episode, but more important than that is the interaction I'm receiving from you, people who are putting their ears on each week to feed your mind, heart, and spirit with news of good people doing good works. Which brings me to my first announcement, the Listener Hotline. I know you've heard me talk about it before, but I want to really be clear about what that hotline is for. It's an opportunity for you to call in to find the good news and have your thoughts heard on the show. If you want to call the hotline and leave a message, comment, question, idea, or concern, really anything at all related to something you've heard on Find the Good News, then you can do that. This show is for you. You don't have to come into the studio to be a part of the conversations we're having on this show. You can find that hotline on my website at findthegood.news. That's findthegood.news. I have the hotline there in several locations, so it should be easy to find. Next week's episode features Megan Abraham, the owner of Fresh Fuel, and in the following weeks I'll be featuring my conversations with the man behind the mugs, Rex Alexander. After that, I'll be sharing my first road trip episode. I'll tell you more about that in upcoming episodes, but I will say that it was a great experience for me to visit with a guest in an environment that's special to them. There will be some additional media elements coming out with that episode, so keep your ears on. I think that's all I've got for this week. As always, I thank you for listening, and I really do appreciate you showing your support by liking, sharing, and leaving reviews. Those reviews are growing, and the show now has a 5-star rating on most of the platforms where it appears. That's all thanks to you. Now, relax, close the hatch, plug in, put your ears on, and let's press play on a little good news. You know the old saying, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. I was never fond of that saying, to be honest. I've known a lot of people with a surplus of lemons, little strength or help squeezing them, much less sugar to sweeten things up. That said, I've still come to believe it is in the womb of our adversities that our gifts gestate and eventually bloom into virtues that manifest blessings for others. That's exactly the type of tale I got to enjoy when I sat down to visit with Susan Riehn on Find the Good News. Susan is the director of Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana, a nonprofit organization and team that puts people with disabilities, their caregivers, and their families in touch with resources they may not have been aware of otherwise. Selfishly, I love to fill my mind and feed my spirit with stories like the one Susan shared. The beauty is not in the story alone, but in the echo and rhyme I sense in it, a set of somewhat common words and tales that reinforce what I hear over and over again on this podcast. I saw a way I could help my fellow beings, and I chose to act. That's really what's at the heart of Susan's story. She had a desperate need, and she did not know where to turn, and a helper arrived. Her story is now the story of Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana, a willingness to be a helper for those without one. If you listen to enough volunteers and servants in our community, especially those at Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana, you'll hear some version of this story of the able helper. I heard this good news clearly when I spoke with Susan Riehn, and I believe fully that you will hear it too.
Wake up, it's morning, you're dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep on the path to your deliverance, and a holy wall of light pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you just want to shut it all down and get no news at all. With Find the Good News, I aim to change that by focusing on good people doing good work. I visit with artists, educators, civic and spiritual leaders, musicians, business owners, students, volunteers, and everyday citizens who are using their creativity, resources, and talents to bring hope and happiness to their corner of the world. In each episode, I dig into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. We have street level conversations about relatable things going on in their lives. Discover the critical life experiences that shape them, the perspectives that drive them, and the fundamental beliefs that are anchoring them to a path of goodness. There's a lot of news in the world. My name is Oran Parker, and I'm going to find the good.
And I love you just as well.
The episode that actually came out this week with Julia O'Carroll. She owns a business called Tea at Walden, and she makes custom pens and journals and then tea, and she does these things called tea talks.
Oh, cool.
And so her whole thing is using a cup of tea as sort of an opportunity to get into a space, where you quiet down the world and like pay attention to the aroma and wait for the water to leave. She says that for the water to bring the leaves back to life. That's the way she worded it.
Oh.
So anyway, I was like, that's an easy thing to try to adopt. And I thought I'd adopt that with each guest that comes in, and kind of add it to the show.
That's a good idea. I like it.
So we're doing herbal berry and oolong today.
I like it.
Me too.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So I know we were just talking off pod, but now we're on pod. So
Okay.
we may have to recap a little bit.
Okay.
And you said the proper way to say your last name is Riehn, right?
Riehn,
so Susan
correct.
Riehn.
Yes.
And you're the director of Families Helping Families.
Of Southwest Louisiana.
Southwest Louisiana. So I don't know a lot about Families Helping Families, and I just know from kind of what I found online and my own little cyber research, I guess. But I'd like to hear it from you, like exactly what Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana actually does for the community.
Sure. I'm happy to talk about Families Helping Families all the time. We are a resource center, a family-directed resource center for individuals with disabilities and their families. Kind of a one-stop shop where you can go if you have anybody in your family with a disability, if you need information, referral, training on disability issues, or peer support. The unique thing about Families Helping Families and why it's called Families Helping Families is that we all have people in our lives. We're caregivers or parents or sometimes people with disabilities ourselves. I have a son who's 31 with a disability. He works, he lives in the community. He was born very, very, very early, 26 weeks.
Wow.
31 years ago. He was in the hospital for 3 months. He had a lot of complications, had some complications later on in life. Had some issues, a few issues in school, but we worked through that. I found help early on, and that's what we try to do with other families is we want to make sure that people that have a child with a disability or have a disability themselves know that it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something I think most parents, you just don't think about that when you have a child, right? I mean,
Right.
and I know disabilities can come later in life
Sure.
too, but I mean, if you make a decision to have a child and you're moving forward with intent, there's always this, we're going to paint the room, we're going to have the baby shower, and everything's just going to go. You create a runway and you
Sure.
think the plane's going to land, right? But sometimes the plane doesn't, it lands, but
Or it lands early.
It lands early. That's great. You've done everything you can do, but you get what you get, and that's the way life goes sometimes.
And it's kind of a coincidence that you talk about a plane landing. I'm not sure if you ever heard of a poem called Welcome to Holland.
No, I've never heard
You should look it up. It's
I will.
by Emily Pearl Kingsley.
Okay.
And it talks about people getting ready for a vacation or a trip. They get ready for Italy. They learn Italian. They pack their bags. They take everything that they, think they need in Italy, and they're all prepared. And the plane lands, and they're in Holland. And they're like, what? How'd we get here? I don't know if I like this, but then they look around and they realize that Holland's not a bad place.
Sure.
Holland has tulips. It's a little different. You have to learn a different language. So I've told this when I did a presentation. I feel like Families Helping Families, we're the tour guides to Holland.
That's interesting.
To help you figure Holland out, even though you were ready for Italy.
Wow, that actually lines up perfectly. We're right on the same page in our thinking. Yeah, so
Oh, I think I have chills.
You don't always, you can do everything you can do. My wife and I were just having this conversation. I was the other day talking to another guest on the show, and we were kind of talking about manifesting things. And I don't think we probably had the exact same view. And I said, well, my perspective of that is you're a partaker in it. You're involved in it. You build the runway. And that was kind of the plane thing came from that. It's like, so you can build the runway and you can do all the stuff. But what lands on that runway, you're inviting something into your life. It may not come. Right. You may not. What lands may not be what. It's kind of like somebody puts a trap out. I've seen this happen. A bunch of people. They're like, I've got, raccoons, or I've got squirrels, and they want to put squirrel traps out. So they put all this food out, and then they get up the next morning, and instead of squirrels, they've got ants. Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you sometimes. You're trying to bait something in, and so you get something different. So what do you do? What do you do with that when that's what happens?
Yeah, and that's what we do at Families Helping Families, because we all have experience with disability services. I had experience with lots of hospital stuff back in the day. I mean, Justin was there for 3 months and then came home with some medical issues, had lots of surgeries. So then school issues and different things like that. So, and then we've got specific training. We may not all have degrees. Some of us may have degrees, but we have specific training from different entities that give us funds. We go to lots of conferences, and we get a lot of information from the state, because Families Helping Families is all over the state.
Oh, okay. It's one organization, or they're all separate?
No, there's 10 organizations, okay. All 501c3 nonprofits. We all have our own board of directors. We all have similar missions, philosophies, and services.
Okay.
But we're in Lake Charles, and we serve the 5 parishes around here. There's a center in Lafayette, Baton Rouge, 2 in New Orleans, 1 in Thibodaux, 1 in Covington, and then another one in Alexandria. I have to point Monroe and Shreveport.
Okay. So, do y'all work together though, even though you're separate?
Yes, we all work together. We have all the executive directors network. If I need something, like yesterday, several of us were at the Capitol. That was Disability Services Day.
Okay.
People with developmental disabilities get different services. One of them is called the Medicaid waiver, and it's so complicated. Anyway, we were there to talk to legislators and let them know that the providers of these services need their rates restored. Back in another administration, the rates have been cut since 2008.
Okay.
And they were cut severely. And now people who employ direct service providers that help with guiding care, I don't want to say they just care for people with developmental disabilities, but they have a very low wage. Oh. So we were talking to legislators about restoring some of the rates so that they could get a better wage, and people with kids, individuals with disabilities, can get better services and get services, because without the rate increase, the services are not able to be provided. Because if you can go to Walmart and make $11 an hour, and you're only making $8 an hour to take care of someone with a disability or help them with their life, you might, and you can't make that many hours, you might choose Walmart rather than something like that.
Sure, because you're most of us work. I mean, I would say almost all of us, especially people who have dependents, you're working for the dependents more than you're working for yourself. I mean, so you're going to have to do.
You have to make a living wage.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, I said all that to say we were all at the Capitol. Several of us were at the Capitol. We were networking. Several of us had our staff there, the people that we work with that help families. And it was a great day to be out at the Capitol. There's lots of people. End of the year, lots of kids running around, school trips. Yeah. So, but we all work together for a common cause.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So y'all have this unity when you need it, and you can go off and be effective in the very particular ways that your community that you're set in needs.
Exactly.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's amazing. I remember, I'm going to go back a few years.
No, please do. Take me all the way back. That's where I like to go.
Take you all the way back. 1960. No, I'm kidding.
I'll go there.
Back after Justin was born, I was just getting he got early intervention services. He was a baby, and they knew he was going to have some issues because he had some issues. He had a brain bleed, different things that caused you to have disabilities. Yeah. He's done extremely well considering all the things that he had issues with. Anyway, long story short, if I could do that.
Oh, well, don't feel like you have to edit on here. Well, this is format's
Okay.
open-ended. There's no time
awesome.
frame. So yeah, you go for it.
Okay, awesome. Anyway, I was at a conference and there was this lady. Her name was Diane Hazelwood. She's one of my mentors from the past. And I met her and she talked about a place. I had been working with the local early intervention place. Skylark was the name. And
Okay.
we had a parent support group because I was lucky enough to be supported when Justin was in the hospital. I had never seen a baby that as small as he was. He weighed 2 pounds, 2 ounces, and he was 13 inches long.
Oh my goodness.
He had see-through skin. He was on a ventilator for 7 weeks. He had all these medical issues. And I'm a little obsessive sometimes. They gave me this book called the Premature Baby Book. It was about 1.5 inches thick. I read it the first night. They had to give me drugs to make me go to sleep.
Because your mind couldn't.
I couldn't stop.
Totally
I couldn't
consumed.
Stop. I was consumed with it, of course,
Yeah.
because I hadn't even seen him yet. Really, they had just wheeled me by the NICU, the NICU, and I had seen him through the window because I hadn't gotten up yet. Anyway, they realized the neonatologist back then, Dr. Lynn, he's a wonderful. I don't know that he's still in practice. Realized that I needed some support. And after about a week or two, and you go to the hospital and you visit 2 or 3 times a day. You
Yeah.
sit outside the isolette, the little thing that the babies are in. And anyway, stressful, real stressful. And he saw that I needed support. So he actually got the nurse practitioner back then, her name was Vicky, to call another parent that had had a child with a disability, the same issues as Justin. And she hooked me up on the phone in the NICU waiting area, and her name is Kay. And she was my support person throughout maybe the first 3 years of Justin's life. So I knew how important support was.
Yeah.
And when I met Diane that day at the conference, it was at McNeese. And we were at I don't even remember what the conference, it was related to parenting kids with disabilities. And she told me, she says, we're about to open a place or start a nonprofit. And it's going to be run by parents. It's going to be for parents. And we're going to be the people that are going to help guide the services. And I looked at her, and I'm a little skeptical sometimes. And I said, I don't think that's going to happen. But if it does, call me.
See, I'll pause you. Why didn't you think it was going to happen?
Back then, it was the very beginning of, it was kind of sort of the beginning of the parent movement.
I'm not familiar.
Parent movement for kids with disabilities.
Okay.
We were sometimes seen as being complaining parents that might talk about doctors and say, don't go to him, or that teacher doesn't do well, so I don't like her, so let's move over here.
It sounds like today with social media. It really does.
Well, yeah.
What you're saying is what happens online.
And sometimes that does happen a lot.
This
and we have
classroom, this teacher, don't make sure you request this one, because this other one,
Right.
Yeah,
and sometimes people have valid concerns.
Sure, but it does sound very
it's
similar.
never a good idea to burn all your bridges. So we work a lot on that at Families Helping Families. Work on collaborating, because unfortunately, and I'm getting off into the weeds kind of, people, when a parent might call us, they have had a bad experience or they're having some issues, so they're already upset.
Yeah.
And then they get to us and we tell them, well, that sounds like it's not exactly supposed to happen like that. Let me help you figure it out. And they might still be angry.
Yeah.
So we like to try to get to families on the front end so we can teach them the rules. I always tell people you can't play Monopoly unless you know the rules. So we try to teach you the rules, help you figure out how to do it yourself. We don't do it for you.
Okay. So y'all are a resource for guidance and information, right?
Correct.
You're not actually doing the thing, though.
No, we're not case managers. We're not counselors. We provide support, information, and training. And I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Well, yeah, the conference. Where you said,
yeah. Anyway, Diane and I parted ways. I heard about a job. I was working at the early intervention. They had hired me because they saw that they needed a parent support person. And they had hired me because they saw that I had a passion for helping other families. So I was working there, and I was having a good time, part-time. I heard about another job. gosh, I can't even remember the name of that position. I think it was a Part C parent advocate or parent facilitator or something. Interviewed for the job, got the job, found out that the job was going to be housed under Families Helping Families that had just opened. Like, they got their 501c3 like the day before I started. Or maybe the day after, yeah. So we had this one little bitty room, smaller, like, I don't know sizes, but that the Office of Public Health out on Chenault, the administrative offices, donated to let us have.
Okay.
We had one phone that two of us shared.
Yeah.
I mean, ground floor stuff.
Yeah, right. Your beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, I was so excited to be able to help other families.
Yeah. And how fast was that traction? Like, okay, we're doing this, and then when does this begin? Like, as far as you start seeing families and interacting with them?
I started, like, the first thing that I did it was kind of baptism by fire. We went to New Orleans to a big conference. Dr. Ken Moses, he is a psychologist that does a lot of work around states of grief rather than stages of grief.
Okay.
Because, when you have a child with a disability, or a child that's different, you go through some of the same things that you do in the grieving process.
For sure.
So I got 3 days of Ken Moses, and it was awesome. And then I started working with families and just, kind of pulling together, try to support groups, different opportunities right after that. We were at the Office of Public Health. I'm trying to remember. This is 27 years ago or longer. We were there for, oops, I keep doing that. We were there for, sorry.
It's okay.
We were there probably a year, I think, and then we moved into another place on Stanton Street, shared with another nonprofit.
Okay.
For a couple of years. And then we had a very forward-thinking board. Diane was the executive director. I worked different programs there.
Okay.
I worked the early intervention program and a couple of other ones, and education. And we had a very forward-thinking board, and they purchased a building on an old house where we're at now.
Oh, okay.
2927 Hodges.
So y'all are in the same location?
Yes, since 96.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so 4 years after we got our own place, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
For a nonprofit, a young nonprofit.
Yeah.
So, and we've been there since, and we've grown, we've added. We were lucky enough to have a large donation in 2008, and we were able to add on 1,500 square feet, and then we renovated the front part. So we have a conference room, several, I can't think how many offices now, 7 offices, library room, foyer, greeting area, kitchen. It's a really nice, welcoming environment where we hope that when people come in, they're, welcomed, and so we can help them.
Yeah.
Because you want to feel relaxed and comfortable.
Right. So what's the first move for somebody? I guess let me rephrase that. How are you connecting with people who need you? Is it a dissemination of information where y'all are making sure that all the doctors and caregivers and any of the varieties of people in those types of industries know about you? Is that really it?
We do that.
Hey,
That's part of what we do. We do a lot of outreach. We have different staff members that for the programs that they work under have to do outreach. So we bring that information to the hospitals, the social workers, clinics, pediatric clinics, and physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, any place that people with disabilities might visit. Mm-hmm. So we get that information out. Unfortunately, that doesn't always trickle down to people.
Sure.
So we use social media a whole lot. We have a Facebook, Twitter. I'm not as good at Twitter. And an Instagram page that we push a lot of information out through. We have a website. We do get a lot of requests from our website. People just email us.
Yeah.
You can call, you can walk in. We have lots of training opportunities around disability issues.
Really?
Yeah.
So for parents or caregivers?
Yeah, parents, caregivers, and professionals. We have a lot of professionals. We have teachers that come to our workshops.
Is that free to them?
Yeah, it's all free.
Wow.
No cost.
I guess... And you have to forgive me my ignorance. I have to say sometimes my ignorance is what makes the show interesting because I have a lot of questions.
Good.
Where are the fences of what is considered a disability?
We don't believe in fences.
Okay.
ADHD, dyslexia, learning disability, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. My son has mild cerebral palsy. He has a learning disability. He has a hydrocephalus from birth.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of resolved now. He hadn't had any issues. Any type of disability. I mean, behavior issues, mental health concerns, lots of kids. Autism. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of resources for autism here, so we do point people in that direction, but we do help people with autism too, help figure out the systems, how things work.
Yeah.
That's sometimes a lot of the issues that we see, the concerns with parents and family members that come in, is they don't really understand how things work should work.
And then when a disability arises, I mean, I have somebody in my life that I consider disabled. I really do, because they weren't. And then because of a medical condition, post procedures, everything has changed. And the whole quality of life has changed. Ability to do just about anything has just diminished. But they're not considered disabled, right? Like on paper, like with a rubber stamp, you're disabled. And so, I've had that thought. I'm glad we're talking, because I mean, as I'm driving around and just meditating on this person, I go, what can I do? I mean, as a person that's in their life, you start to think, well, I have to do you got to start doing it. You got to do it. And then I go, man, I don't even know where to begin. Is that a situation where I would approach someone like Families Helping Families and go, hey,
we can tell
I've got a family member, and they're not on paper, they're not disabled, but they're disabled.
And tell us what you're looking for, or just call us and we'll talk to you and help you figure out what you might be looking for. Yeah,
that's exactly. I am like
people don't know what questions to ask.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think there's probably more people that are out there.
Oh yeah.
Just driving around that don't know caregiving or what have you. Maybe not officially with the title that you'd say, but they're doing the stuff, and they have somebody in their life like that. They don't know. So they go just, I don't know what to do. And they start getting on the internet and sort of go down all these rabbit holes, and there's
things on the internet that can help. We can point you to that. I mean, there's things, there may not be a specific place or program for the type of disability, but we can kind of help you figure out what's out there, so you can at least look around and know what to ask. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, if you don't know what to ask, you might call a place and say, hey, do you do this? And they say,
Right.
But if you say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, is this something that you can help me with?
Yeah.
They might say, yeah. So we help families not only know where to go, what to ask when they get there, how things work.
And I'm happy, I know it.
If you're like me, then you've got a long wish list of things you need to do around your house. Things you just can't get to. It's not that I don't want to do them, but between my responsibilities at work, producing this show, and squeezing in some valuable mental downtime, I can't seem to get around to fixing the small stuff, and the big stuff is just waiting in line. To be honest, it kind of stresses me out. Maybe you're stressing out too. Well, stress no more, because I've got good news. My friend Ben Von Duke has started a handyman service, and he takes the mystery out of getting these things done. Ben Von Duke is not just some guy that calls himself handy. He knows what he's doing, and he knows a whole lot. Not only is he an experienced and professional carpenter, but he's kind of a Duke of all trades. What I love is that he's created an a la carte price list of services, so you don't have to worry about getting in your pockets too deep before you're ready. He'll fix your running toilet, install appliances, replace fixtures, install ceiling fans, repair sheetrock and concrete, and a whole lot more than that. Look, I'm not too proud to say this, but sometimes it takes me 3 times as long to fix something, because I've got to get online and search videos just to figure out what tools I need. Then I have to go buy the tools that I don't have, and then kind of sort of come home and do the job. I don't have to do that anymore, because Ben Von Duke will do it, and do it better. On top of all that, he's just a good person, someone you can trust. He's honest, he's kind, and those are things that I value highly, and I bet you do too. You can get a hold of Ben Von Duke, the Duke of all trades, the good old-fashioned way, by using the phone. Call or text Ben at 337-540-1355. That's 337-540-1355. He'll send you his service and price list, and trust me, his prices are more than fair. And do me a favor, When you do message Ben at 337-540-1355, tell him you heard about the Duke of all trades on Find the Good News. What a blessing that is. You're talking about something right there that I think is sorely lacking in our world, and I'd like to see it bloom again, because that happens here a lot. I mean, granted, we're a creative agency, marketing and advertising and branding, but there are times when we get calls and there's things that we may not do or things that we don't want to do. But I don't think, and I don't know, my customers or anybody that's ever talked to me on the phone would have to answer this, but I don't ever take the approach of, no, we don't do that, bye.
We don't do that either. No.
I try to go, well, look, I do have some knowledge of the thing. I may not do the thing, but I know enough about it. And I may have a vendor I can point you to, or at least I've spent, and again, I'm not trying to go, pat myself on the back. It's just the reality of being helpful. Just taking an attitude of helpfulness.
That's right.
And I want to see more of that in the world, because I do see in some interactions professionally where you ask a question and someone goes, the answer is just no. And it's very dry and very cold. I'm like, how much more energy does it take to just be a little helpful? It shouldn't deplete you. It should lift you as the helper.
Work really hard not to do that. A lot of times we can't find help for people because it's not out there. Unfortunately, we don't have funds to pay rent, utilities, or anything like that. But sometimes that family might have a service that they don't know does something like that.
Right.
So we can say, hey, what kind of disability do you have? Are you getting any services? Or maybe we can hook them up with the service, and maybe the next time they need help, they could help.
Do you ever encounter a situation where somebody contacts you and they say, look, I know this sounds, and again, I have to plead ignorance. I don't know the right words, but to say,
I'll help you.
Hey, I think I'm disabled because I had this.
Yes.
I got in an accident and now whatever. My left arm doesn't work. I'm just making this up.
Right.
And now I've got problems and I can't do what I used to do. But I think I'm disabled, but I'm not officially labeled disabled, so I can't get any resources.
Yeah.
And what do you do in that situation? You point them towards?
You might point them towards their doctor for a diagnosis. You might point them towards the Social Security Administration to apply for services if that's where they are. You might point them towards Louisiana rehabilitation services, where they may help them because they have a disability find another career that they can do.
Yeah.
There's just lots of different places to, that you could point them in that direction.
And that gets them moving on that path where they're like, okay, I don't have to suffer out here all alone with no resources. Right. There are things out there for me as a person. Because
what we do is enable and empower people with disabilities. Like I said earlier, we don't do it for you. We're going to give you the information. Yeah. We're going to set you on your way, and we're going to tell you how to do it. And then we're going to call you. My office mate says, and if people tell you something you don't understand, or sometimes she says something stupid, call us back. We'll help you figure it out. Because a lot of times there's overwhelming amount of information you can give somebody, and you can overwhelm them. So what we try to do is give you enough to get started, and then say, okay, call me back after you do this, and we're going to work you through it.
Right.
Or come in, bring your stuff, let's look at it and see what you got, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, I think that's probably anybody who's trying to help somebody, you can almost overhelp at some point on the front end.
And when you have a child with a disability and you've been where we've been, or if you have a disability yourself, you really want to say, oh gosh, you need to go here and here and here and do this and this and this and this. So you got to rein yourself in and say, okay, calm down.
Yeah.
Call us back. Let's do this. And then let's go into the next step.
Something that we were talking about off pod at the beginning, and I want to kind of circle back to, which I was really fascinated by, and maybe we can go off into the weeds wherever we want on that, is this, what you said about people with disabilities really shouldn't be separated from us. They shouldn't be put in separate classrooms. They shouldn't be placed in separate programs, separate jobs, and isolated from people without disabilities.
Correct. We believe in inclusion for everyone. Anybody with any type of disability. That's what we were founded on. There's an act that the legislature, it's called Act 378, and I'm gonna I don't have any props to remember dates or anything. It was back in the end of the 80s. And it basically said people with disabilities, even the most severe disabilities, should be able to have the opportunity to live, work, and thrive and do whatever they need to do in their own community, and they shouldn't be in institutions. Because back in the 80s, even the 90s, and even sometimes now, they have people that live in what we call institutions. Other people call them nicer names, but I believe in calling a duck a duck. So
Things are what they are.
They in the 50s. I mean, I don't know if you know anything about. You may not know anything about special education or disability law.
I don't know
but
a
back
lot,
in the
no,
50s
at all.
and the 60s. In the 70s even, I think Geraldo Rivera, I don't know if you've ever seen that expose he did on the institutions.
I haven't.
I mean, they had children, and it makes me, I can't hardly talk about it, living in squalor, in rooms with nobody ever talking to them, without clothes. All these kids had disabilities.
Yeah.
And their parents had been told, as parents were told back in the day, they have Down syndrome, they have a cognitive disability, they called it other things back in the day. I don't really say those things. We prefer cognitive disability. Some people still say mental retardation. We don't say those type of words. I know it's a descriptor, but I don't.
Right.
I don't like that
Well,
word.
why not just use a kinder way of saying something? I mean,
Yeah.
if you can, why
That's
not?
right. That's right.
I mean, how hard is it?
Doctors, and they. I'm not slamming doctors at all. Would tell you, this is going to ruin your marriage. They're never going to be able to do anything. There's a place over here for them.
God, what you just described sounds like the early seeds of not having it goes back as far as humans have been on Earth, but the self, like that appeals to the self and the desire to have comfort for the self.
Right.
It's like,
It's
well,
gonna
this
be
is going to
too
be
hard
too hard
for
on
you.
you. I mean, you're
That's
not going
right.
to be able to have a normal career. It's going to take a lot of time.
They can't.
You're not going to,
They can't go to school.
Yeah.
Because back then, I mean, everybody's seen Forrest Gump. We all remember that the principal didn't want to take Forrest because his IQ was too low. That's a real thing. Now there's laws that have been passed. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Before that, it was called the Education for All Handicapped Act. I could go way back. That says that kids with disabilities need to be in school with everybody else and educated alongside their typically developing peers. Period.
I mean, it does make sense.
Yeah. And there's laws that have been enacted for people with disabilities to have jobs. And those are all the things that we believe are right and good.
Yeah.
I mean, even the most significant disability, cognitive disability, using assistive technology, wheelchairs. I saw one of my friends yesterday, Lynette Doge, I believe, Fontenot is her last name now. And she uses a wheelchair, and it's a motorized chair, and she has, I believe, cerebral palsy, and she moves it with her eyes and an iPad.
Wow.
That's how she drives. That's how she doesn't speak well. She can nod and say yes and shake her head no. But if you want to talk to her, she talks through her speech device. Extremely smart girl, an artist. She graduated from college. I mean, her body just has some issues and can't do things, but her mind can do it.
Do you think we're getting better or worse in that regard as just a collective creature, are we getting better and being more compassionate and accepting and trying to make sure that everybody's included? Do you think
I think we've gotten much better than when we first started. I think, as with anything, there's a pendulum.
Yeah.
And sometimes it swings one way and back and goes back, and we have to fight to get it to go back.
Yeah. That's the
other
word
direction.
right there, right? Sometimes it is a fight, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. I don't like to focus on that.
Me either, really, but I think about that a lot.
But it is, and we try to train other families to be assertive rather than aggressive.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just need somebody to talk to, and that you can say, "Hey, this is a fight, and I'm tired,
Yeah.
and I can't do it anymore. And can you help me?"
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the fight, we know the struggle,
Yeah.
but we know the joys.
Right.
So, I mean, we can give you all that.
Yeah, I think I'm a lot like you. I don't like the fight. I don't like the aggression. I don't like any of those things, and I don't want those things. I've had enough of it. I think all the things in life that I've had to fight for, or had to say something about, or be aggressive about, and I'm at a point where I just go, there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that going on, just on over things that are valueless. Why do I want to have that in me? But every once in a while, there is something where it's like, okay, to do for another, or to protect another's integrity or their livelihood or
to
their
make sure
well-being.
they get a job when they grow up.
Yeah.
Oran, I mean,
you got to fight for it.
Yeah, you do. You don't have a choice. These are our kids.
Yeah.
If not me, then who?
Right.
Who's going to do it? No one else is going to do it.
Yeah, isn't that something though? That's the thing. So I always ask this of people who come on the show, and you've told where the roots are of this for you, but does it go back further than that for you? Like, I mean, I know that where you're at today is directly tied to your son. There's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you draw that line there. That's an easy, straight line to that.
Oh, yeah.
But like, do you ever reflect before that sort of event horizon right there and go, some of the seeds of this go back before that?
I was always the one in school I was picked on a lot.
Yeah.
I was always different.
How so?
I was always bigger than everyone else. I talked about this the other day to somebody, and it's not a problem. I've always been overweight my whole life. Back in the 60s and the 70s, I was always the only little fat girl. And so I got teased a lot. Middle school was horrible. But, I lived through it.
Sure.
You do. But I could get away. I could go home to my safe space back then. To my room and read, or to my mom and everybody, my brothers and sister who loved me, and they didn't pick on me.
Yeah.
But now you can't get away from it. It's on the phone. It's on social media. It's everywhere.
Well, there's are leaks. It is interesting. And my son went through that. Junior high was terrible.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. And kids were so cruel.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. You just described his life. He'd go to school. It was torment. And then when he'd come home, he was around everybody who loved him, and we all loved him and elevated him. But, and I just, sometimes I reflect on kids that don't have that at all. They don't have either. They go to school and they're tormented, and then they go home and there's nobody there elevating to try to counterbalance what they're receiving from their peers, at school.
I was always a kid that I tried to stick up for the underdog, the ones that other people picked on, because I knew how it felt to be picked on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of roots as a kid.
Man, I got to be honest, and I don't know. Sometimes this microphone turns into this confessional, but I was the same way for a long, long time. But there have been a handful of times when I was in high school where I didn't stick up for the underdog, and I kind of maybe didn't pick on somebody, but I didn't say anything either. And that really ate at me, man. Like those, I can think of them still. Like those handful of times where I didn't stand up, right, and just go. Even if it was somebody, a friend group that was doing it, probably would have been safer for me to go, guys, don't do this. But I didn't do it, and I just let it go on. But I remember, I guess it was after high school, sometime in the 90s. There was this one particular young man that. He was a target, and everybody picked on him. Even my friend group did. And I remember we were at Subway, and he was getting a sandwich, and when he went to go outside, I just went outside and just asked if I could apologize to him. And I just sat there and I cried, man. And he held me, hugged me, and let me cry. And I was so thankful for his forgiveness, honestly, because I may not have said the words, but I think sometimes not doing anything's just as bad.
That's right.
It really is, and that's stuck with me ever since. And I swore I'd never do it again. I would never. Not only would I not be a part of it, which I really have never really been, but I wouldn't stand there anymore. I'm just not going to do it. And that was 20 something years ago, but it was a big moment. It was a big changer for me.
That's awesome.
And then to be, honestly, He didn't have to forgive me. He could have said, you didn't do anything. He could have just been and gave it right back to me, and I would have deserved it, Yeah. But he didn't, and I think probably, now in retrospect, I mean, all these years later, I feel like I've learned so much that I think I didn't, even then in that moment, it's only now that I can reflect on that and go, this guy gave me the gift of compassion that I did not give him, and I did not deserve, and he gave it to me anyway. And what if he hadn't? I mean, I don't know. That's just something in there for me that I just can't forget that.
Yeah. I think you're going to find that more often than not, because we know how it feels.
Yeah.
To have to forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
And he gave you that forgiveness.
Right. And that's a hard thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to ask for forgiveness.
Yes,
like
it is.
real forgiveness.
Yeah.
And it's hard to give it sometimes too. I don't know. I get hung up on that. That's something I reflect on that all the time. Where we said fences earlier, and there are no fences, and I hope that with whatever time I have left, and I don't know how much that is, but I mean, I hope that I'm moving the fence of where I can forgive, and I hope to get into a place where I can be really find that there is no offense anymore,
right?
To be unoffendable, at some point in my life. I don't know if that'll ever come, but I'd like to think that. But yeah, I mean, so that's where I see the seeds of that. So you start, that even starts there, working for the underdog and the oppressed, and somebody that's maybe on the outside.
Just compassion, having compassion for other people, and seeing, because you've been, I guess because of, the things that I went through, I can understand.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how being picked on as a child can do that to you? I mean, it's an incredible gift. At the time, it does not feel like a gift.
No,
I used to have to tell my son that all the time.
Yeah.
That was something we talked about at least 3 times a week out in the parking lot at school before school. I was like, someday, if you can survive this without letting it just make you bitter, someday you're going to have something you can tap into that the tormentor does not have.
That's right.
It's going to be like a fuel that drives you to do and to be. And I've seen that in my son. And I'm sure he'll change as he gets older, but I've seen that happen now that he's in high school. I'm like, wow, look, he is almost always on the side of the underdog and the oppressed, almost 100% of the time. And he's very vocal about it. He's not afraid. And I'm like, look at what happened. Yeah,
that's awesome, not to be afraid, because sometimes you have to speak out even though your voice is shaking.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's the hardest thing,
that is
right?
the hardest thing.
Does that ever happen in y'all's line of work? I mean, is there any times where you just go, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable and difficult?
Sure.
Yeah.
Especially when you're working with families and maybe working with teachers and different professionals that you work with all the time. It might be a little uncomfortable to say, hey, they're right. You're not right. This is what we need to do.
Yeah.
So that's just something that you have to work through.
Yeah. Well, has there ever, I mean, I know respecting privacy fully. Is there anything that in this time that you've worked with families, helping families, that have just been sort of what I call hinge moments where you go, oh, this solidified our mission. This action we took made a huge difference, and things changed because of it?
I think when families come to us and they send us a graduation picture,
man, yeah,
or someone is working, you see them in the store, and they have a job, and you know where they came from and what struggles they had to get there.
Yeah,
I mean, that's always exciting for us. Yeah. We have people graduation from kindergarten sometimes is a success. Just celebrating those successes. And sometimes, one of the big things for me, and I don't get to do it as much because as the director, I'm making sure everybody's doing what they're doing, and making sure the bills get paid and the grants get written and the invoices get out and different things like that. Is when you see the light bulb go off in somebody's mind, when you tell them something that, it's going to be okay. It's not, or you tell them about someone, hey, I know this guy, this family, and their child is similar to yours, and he's working at Albertsons. My son works at Albertsons.
Okay.
And he's got a job, and my son's living on his own.
You're not.
I mean, he's very capable. He needs a little bit of help, but there was a time in his early 20s that I didn't think that was ever going to happen. But it did, and it does every day. And I do my very best to support him, to make sure that he stays out there.
Yeah. I think, that's something that as a parent you want, right? Especially if your child has had any kind of difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've kind of had similar things with my daughter. She's had difficulties. And, I am watching her now do things on her own. I mean, yeah, granted, sometimes she does need some assistance and support. I mean, that's what I want that as a parent. That's part of my job. But seeing her, I used to think, I don't hear from her for a week or two, and that used to terrify me. Mm-hmm. And now I've kind of flipped. I go, when I don't, that means it used to scare me years ago. Now it's she's okay. She's actually okay. These are signs of what you wanted, right?
Yeah,
you want them to be okay.
Because that's what you tell everybody. You want your child to grow up and be a citizen, live in the community, and be happy. That's what you want your kids to be, is happy ultimately.
Yeah.
And grandkids are nice too, though.
Yeah. And you have grandkids?
I have 3 grandkids.
3 grandkids,
yeah.
right.
19, 17, going to be 18 in December, she told me 2 days ago.
Oh my
and
gosh.
a 14-year-old.
Wow. That's wild. See, my son is 16. Well, he'll be 16 this summer. My oldest will be 21. Mm-hmm. So my children are...
I know. I'm an old lady. It's okay, though.
No, I mean, I can't even imagine having grandkids. My daughter doesn't seem like she's on that track.
It's the best thing ever.
Is it?
It's your prize for not killing your teenagers. Because your grandkids think you're awesome most of the time.
Yeah.
Mine thought I was the best thing in the world when they were little, and they still do sometimes.
Oh, man, I don't know when or if I'll have them. My daughter just isn't on that track. I mean, and
You never know.
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
know.
And my son, he's
Maybe
15,
adopted grandkids,
yeah,
You never know.
And our youngest, he's 8. So.
Oh, wow. You
Yeah.
have a big age gap.
Yeah, I do.
I did the same thing, 7 years between my kids.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. See, my first 2 children were from a previous marriage,
Gotcha.
and then got divorced, and then Michelle and I met, and we were together for 6 years, I think, 6 or 7 years before we got married, and then we got married, and I honestly thought I was done having children, and then
Surprise.
Michelle was like, "No, I want to have one," and I was like, "Oh boy." And I think I always tell this story, and I say it with a smile lovingly. I was like, it's been so long since I had one. And Jonah, I remember, because he had just learned to tie his shoes. And in my mind, I had these mental, unwritten checklists of things that I don't have to do anymore. Right?
Change a diaper.
Change a diaper, wipe their butts in the bathroom. Okay, they're you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like, okay,
I got you.
You get through all that, and they're doing all the stuff. They're dressing themselves, and it's like tying shoes was like that last little tricky thing, and Jonah had just finished. And then Michelle had said, I want to have a baby, us have a baby. And I remember a little bit of anxiety, and all of a sudden I went through the checklist, I gotta do the late nights, the bottles, the diapers, I was just going through the list, and I was like, okay, all right. You
went through that pretty fast.
we did, and it was really, and it's been a blessing. I wouldn't change it, but I do remember that gap kind of created a little bit of whew, I don't know if I'm ready.
Yeah, surprise.
Yeah.
You're always ready. You can get ready.
I feel like that now. I mean, honestly, if I found out I was having a baby now, I wouldn't sweat it, because I think being a parent comes really naturally once you've done it a few times. It's old hat.
There you go.
And it's a great blessing too, whatever is going on with your children.
Right. And that's what we hope to help families, remember that it is a blessing having kids to be able to raise, and no matter what their abilities are.
Yeah. I remember I didn't have a lot of experience, I guess, as a young person being around anybody with a disability, or what would be considered a common disability. But when I was, I guess, 17 or 18 years old, I I used to like to draw comic book characters, and there was a guy that I met at a video store, one of my dad's video stores, and he liked to draw too, and he was in a wheelchair, and we were close in age. We weren't exactly the same age, but I do remember him being the first friend I'd ever had who that was a permanent disability. You know, he was going to be in a chair for the rest of his life, and had been since he was a young boy. And, you know, I learned a lot from that friendship about myself and about people with disabilities, because what I learned, and I may be wrong, I have to plead ignorance, but what I reflect on sometimes about that relationship is that, and what I learned is that people with disabilities don't get up in the morning and go, I'm disabled, right?
Right. Because
sometimes as a person, when you don't have anybody in your life that has a disability of any kind, you can tend to like project that, and God, I hate this. I'm so ashamed, but I'm just going to put it on the table. Like, even when I was a kid, there was a guy who used to wash the windows at my dad's video store, and I remember there was something wrong with his leg. It was like, I don't know what it was, but it was like thin. Mm-hmm. There was no muscle on the leg, and he limped everywhere. And I remember, and this is so ignorant of me, but I guess I was just young. I equated that with him not having everything, all of his faculties about him. Mm-hmm. I never spoke to the man, but there was this assumption, and I thought, man, as I got older, I went, how foolish, and why does that happen? Why do we assume that there's a physical ailment equals to something being wrong with them as a person,
or that somebody in a wheelchair can't hear?
Yeah, right. No, it's true.
You have to talk louder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and I don't know where that comes from or why we're wired that way, but it seems pretty common. I mean, you see it all the time. It's like a stereotype.
Yeah, and we try to break down those stereotypes, and I think it comes with education, Oran. I think you just didn't know.
And I'm happy.
You're driving down the road, everything is going just fine. You're listening to the new episode of Find the Good News in your car, and you're all stoked about trying out this zipper merge thing you've been hearing about, when all of a sudden you hear that sickening tap on your windshield that's just a little too loud. I've got some bad news for you. You've just got yourself a rock chip. Unfortunately, I've got some worse news. If you don't take care of that rock chip, it's going to turn into a crack. But I do have some good news too. You don't have to have a rock chip or a crack, because I've got a way for you to take care of it ASAP. If you go to asapglassco.com right now, you can stop that chip from winding across your windshield like the Calcasieu River. I used to be terrible about getting a rock chip, saying I'll take care of that later, and then later turns into this irritating crack that just spreads from one side of my windshield to the other. I should have taken care of it ASAP by scheduling a repair with ASAP Glass. ASAP Glass is local, right here in Sulphur, Louisiana, and they're mobile. Even better, you can get a quote right from your mobile phone at asapglassco.com. ASAP Glass is owned and operated by two of my best friends, lifelong friends, Dan and Kayla Smith. Dan the Glass Man will make sure his team of glass technicians gets to your job ASAP and make sure it's done right so you can keep that windshield crack out of sight. If you do get that rock chip and you don't take care of it ASAP, that's okay. ASAP Glass does complete windshield replacements. Remember, ASAP Glass is mobile, so you don't have to worry about finding time to drop your vehicle off at their shop. You get your quote at asapglassco.com. Make your appointment with Kayla, and then before long, an ASAP Glass van is on its way to your location. That's it. I know you're probably looking at a rock chip right now. Don't wait. Take care of it ASAP. Go to asapglassco.com on your mobile device and get a quote. That's asapglassco.com. And make sure to tell Dan and Kayla you heard about ASAP Glass on Find the Good News.
You know, my grandkids have always been around people with disabilities because they've grown up around here and around me and seeing other people with disabilities, so they kind of have an idea. Oh yeah, he has Down syndrome. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what else I learned? It was interesting, and again, I can only speak for myself, but as a young person, once that friendship sort of began to flourish and became more regular in my life with my friend in the wheelchair, the wheelchair sort of disappeared. right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it disappeared, and then all the little things that he had to do all the other things that we did, drive a car, swim. I remember the first time he invited me to go swimming in his house, and I went, what? I remember that. I do remember thinking, what are we going to do? He isn't going to swim.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And after I went swimming in his house a few times, that disappeared too. He had to do things in a different way. His apartment had lower, cabinets, and there were just things in there. And even as a friend, you begin to morph with them the more time you spend around with them, right? I got to where I was like, he got in his car, I'd put his chair in the back of the car. And it wasn't like I felt like a helper. Does that make sense?
No,
like all those little
natural.
identities and stuff just melt away, and you just become part of their life.
He becomes your friend.
Yeah, he becomes
He's not your friend in a wheelchair. He's
That's
your
right.
friend.
I mean, I can't hear in my left ear, but I got about 90%, 95% hearing loss. Well, my whole family, when we go out to dinner, they all sit in particular places because they know Dad is not going to be able to hear us if we don't sit right here. Well, they're doing the same thing, right? I mean,
Right.
they're going, they're not sitting there going, oh, poor disabled Dad.
Yeah. No, they're making accommodations.
Make sure Daddy gets to sit here. They're just flowing with you because
it's just life. And that's what we want people to understand, that it's just life. Some of us live it differently. Some of us need accommodations. Used to have a friend who's an attorney who had polio as a child. Mm-hmm. And he said he would do disability awareness type workshops. And he would tell everybody, that chair you're sitting in, that's an accommodation. You might, if you didn't have that, you'd have to stand up. You might get tired standing up. He says, he used canes. My canes are an accommodation. My wheelchair is an accommodation. It helps me to be able to do things everybody else does.
Sure.
It doesn't make me Superman. It doesn't make me any better than anybody else. It doesn't make me want to be put on a pedestal, because that's one thing that people with disabilities don't want to be. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm losing it.
No, but I know what you're going for. You don't want to put them in a glass jar and say, "Oh, I'm special. Treat me differently."
Not so much that, but there's a whole lot of, and I'm probably getting into the weeds and getting into some different territory for some people, but there's some people with disabilities that don't appreciate the the videos that you see of a pretty young girl asking the boy with a disability to the prom.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, it's sort of it's a little condescending.
Like, look at me.
Almost. Yeah, it's
and I think it's wonderful that people are included, and I think it's great. It's when we cross that line and make that how we treat people with disabilities.
I think that's what I liked about, and it wasn't just disabilities, but we really loved the show Glee when it was on TV, and I liked the way they handled a lot of things on that show. It wasn't like a lot of people felt like, oh, they're trying to put things in your face. I've heard those sentiments, and I went, well, I don't see it that way. I just saw it as like, hey, this is the people you're going to encounter out in the world, and they're all together in one space,
right?
And that's just okay, right? I mean, that's just okay that we're all together, and it should be that way.
And we all figure out where we belong and how we fit in. And sometimes you have to help your friend put his wheelchair in the back of the trunk.
Right.
Sometimes you have to cut somebody's sandwich in half, like I did yesterday, because somebody needed some assistance. And they said, I need this cut in half. I said, hang on. So I went and got the stuff, cut it in half for her. Then she was able to eat. I mean, it was just awkward for her. So she needed help. She asked for it. I gave it to her. No big deal.
Right. But I do see that, though, out there. It seems like I do see a sentiments like that out in the world, where it's like almost a resistance in some places to do anything special. And it's like, hey, look, you just need to get along. You just need to flow in with everybody and go with the herd, and don't complain. And it's an attitude of non-help. It's an attitude of conformity. They'd rather you conform than to just seek than to be helped, and I don't like that, actually. I think maybe to some degree we all kind of have to work together, but there are circumstances. It's not just black and white. Sometimes people have things in their life where they just need some help, and what's wrong with giving that help?
Nothing.
I
have a real hard time with black and white.
Well, sure, I don't encounter it a whole lot.
Yeah. There's a lot of gray out there, and we have to make the gray work for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, this has really, really been pretty informative. I really, honestly didn't have a full grasp of what y'all do.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I've said everything that we do, but...
Well, no, but I mean, it gives you people
us.
I hope somebody who hears this, our conversation, I really do hope that they are like me, and honestly, if they're living out here in sort of ignorance, which I mean, I hate to use that word, but that's the truth. I just didn't know.
It's not ignorance. It's when Justin was born in 87, there was, my neighbor worked for the early intervention program that I talked about earlier. It was called Skylark. It was where they would go into the homes and visit with kids that had been born early or had a disability, and they would work with you to do different things to help them catch up. And we had that service for Justin after he came home. Well, Emma worked there. I didn't even know she worked there. And she came and talked to me about it. And then she said something about Skylark. And I remembered that I had seen a commercial with these cute little babies. One of them happened to have Down syndrome, and the other one had some other kind of disability. And it was about Skylark early intervention. But because I didn't need that at the time, because I had a typical 7-year-old that was just going, second grade, doing whatever, and it just clicked into my head, and I thought, oh, that's what that was about. So a lot of times people don't pay attention to us, not because they don't want to pay attention, but because they don't need us.
Yeah.
So, but we want that to be in the back of your mind, kind of like that commercial was for me. And if you see somebody that has a child with a disability that might need some help, tell them to call us.
Yeah.
I mean, not worst case scenario. A lot of times people just call us and say, hey, I have a son. He has a disability. He has learning disabilities in resource class at school or whatever. What do y'all do? So we tell them, hey, we provide information, referral, we do trainings. Why don't you let us put you on our mailing list? Go like our Facebook page, and we'll send you lots of emails about all the stuff that we got going on.
Yeah.
We'll send you a newsletter, and maybe that's all they ever need. Yeah. They may not need anything else.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I've experienced with this show, and I'm so glad you agreed to come in, because it adds further density to what I know now. Because, I find that every episode that I've had, everybody I've gotten to encounter, I've learned something new. Some people I've known already, but there's things I didn't know about what they offered through their organization or their group, or even just in their lives, their history. And so what's happened is, as I'm encountering new people and I see a need, what I can point them to gets greater and greater, right? I can go, oh, well, I talked to this person, I talked to that person, here's their organization, here's what they offer, you should contact them. And in a way, we can all kind of be like you guys and become a hub for a person if we just allow ourselves to learn about what's good going on in our community.
A helper, a resource person, the go-to guy.
Yeah.
I'll call him. He'll know where to tell me to go.
That's one of my favorite, the word helper. I love it because it's in this Buddhist prayer from, Shantideva. And one of the lines is, may I be a helper for those without one, a guide for all travelers on the way. And that's just a little portion. But I always, that one line always kicks into my head, especially when I get a ping where I sense that somebody needs something and I'm in a position to do it, just immediately. And it's not always something I can plan ahead for. Sometimes it just happens out in the world. But at that line, can I be a helper for those without one? Because that's sometimes that's all you need to do, and most of that time that help, it starts with just listening to people, I'm sure y'all do a lot of that.
And that's what I hope to do and hope to give back, because I had Kay, who was a helper when I needed it. I didn't have anyone that understood what I was going through. I was like, I had a baby, and I went to the grocery store without the baby. And I went everywhere without the baby, and they all wondered, where's the baby? So you had to go through the whole thing and tell them the whole story. But Kay was the person I didn't have to explain anything to. When Justin was extubated, he was on a ventilator for the first 7 weeks. When Justin was extubated, I called her before I called my now ex-husband, because she understood. Yeah. Now, then I called him next, of course. But she understood what it was like. She knew the joy, how excited I was because of that one simple thing. He could breathe with oxygen rather than having a tube down his throat. Yeah. I mean, it was exciting.
If you sit and, that is a beautiful thing. how consoling is that? I mean, if you sit and listen to somebody just long enough, an hour and 30 minutes, and give them an opportunity to talk to you about whatever is going on in their life, you may not really be able to help them with, 30 things that they mention. But if you listen to them long enough, I bet you might hear 3. And if you can help them with those 3, then they're on their way, right? I mean, that's it. I mean, and some of that's just having an open heart and just being willing to be present and not blow right by.
Right. And to give back to what I had been given.
Yeah.
That's the best feeling.
I know. I listen. I'm looking at you as you say that. I mean, that is just an incredible thing to see how you've taken that gift that you were given, and now that's what you do. You give that gift away.
And what an incredible feeling and an opportunity. I mean, I'm so happy and blessed, and I don't say that lightly, to be able to do this. I mean, I get up in the morning and want to go to work because there might be something new. I'm going to talk to a new person. I'm going to find a new resource. We're going to have a different workshop. We're going to encounter someone else, help somebody through something.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not like a job. I always say this is a mission. It's not a job.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky to have been able to do this for 27 years with not a whole heck of a lot of training in the back. I mean, from the beginning. So I just have been on the job training in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely lucky.
I love that. I love that it's just what you said. I mean, doesn't feel like it's a job. It's a mission.
Yeah.
I really like that.
And I get to do it every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm happy, I know it.
This episode's Fishing for Goodies fishbowl sponsor is Brimstone Museum and Henning Cultural Center in Sulphur, Louisiana. I don't know what you look for when you travel, but one of the things I look for when I'm putting together my itinerary is a unique museum or gallery in the city I'm traveling to. I do this almost every time I go to a new city, but if I'm being honest, I'm guilty of not always doing that very thing right here at home in Sulphur, Louisiana. That's really a shame because we have one of the most interesting, historically relevant, and culturally rich corners in any city in the country about 2 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. I'm talking about the Brimstone Museum and Henning Cultural Center. Have you ever really thought about why our city is named Sulphur? They've got a permanent exhibit on the history of the sulfur industry that answers that simple question and more. You really get a full scope of just how important the sulfur mining industry was to the development of Southwest Louisiana and the impact it had on the rest of the world. Yes, the rest of the world. On the same property, right next door to the museum, is the Henning Cultural Center, presenting some of the most interesting, modern, and culturally relevant local art shows I've ever seen. My dear friend Tom Trahan and the Brimstone Historical Society have really worked hard to give us this treasure, and it's a multifaceted jewel that I plan to take advantage of more often. You don't have to wonder what their hours are, or how to get there, or what shows are coming up. Just go to brimstonemuseum.org like I did, and subscribe to their mailing list right there on the homepage. That's brimstonemuseum.org. Tom will make sure you start getting the announcements for each and every new show at the gallery. But you don't have to wait for the mail to arrive to enjoy this historical local treasure. You don't have to be guilty, like me, of overlooking a local wonder that conveniently sits next to the Grove, one of the most beautiful walking parks in Southwest Louisiana. Drop in and say hi to Tom for me. Tour the museum and center, and make sure to tell Tom that you heard about Brimstone Museum on Find the Good News. Now, let's take that dive in the fishbowl. I don't know if you've listened to this show. Have you listened to it?
I have listened to a couple.
So do you know about the fishbowl?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I didn't listen to the end. There was one that I didn't go all the way to. Both of them didn't go all the way to the end.
Well, it's a long show. That's a long show.
It was you and Tony.
Oh, and that's a pretty long episode.
Yeah.
That's actually our
awesome.
most listened to episode.
That was awesome.
Do you know Tony well?
Yeah, we attend Water's Edge.
Oh, you do? Okay. So many people who have been on here attend Water's Edge.
Yes, it's the best place ever, the most inclusive. I mean, you talk about inclusion.
Yeah,
it's inclusive.
That's exactly what I sense from them. And that episode has generated
welcoming.
so much conversation and so many. I mean, every week when I look at our stats, it's downloaded week after week after week. And I just, as the years go by, if we're lucky enough to continue doing the show, that I just don't see that changing.
Yeah.
It's because the message is something people need to hear.
Yes.
Well, on Tony's episode, I don't think we had this, but the fishbowl is basically questions that other guests have put in and questions that I have put in and some cards and gaming cards and things like that. So what each guest does is they reach in and draw one out and then we talk about it.
Oh, okay.
So there's some slips of paper in there that feel like fortune cookies. Those are some of the ones the guests have put in. There's the cards are in there, and then there's some big cards that are would you rather questions.
I'm not getting one of those. Let's see. Okay. So I have to put my glasses on to see this. Where are you currently saying yes in your life when you really should say no? Really? Really?
That's a pretty hard question.
Wow, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
I say yes a lot.
I do too.
I say yes. I don't say no.
I am learning
enough.
that I have to.
Yes,
though.
I have learned. That is one thing I've learned over the 27 years is some limits and boundaries to be able to say no. I can't do that too.
Yeah. Two.
Yes, I can't do that too.
Well, that's a good way to put that. I guess I haven't framed it that way. I do. I guess I feel guilty sometimes for saying no to things because I know we're still in a kind of small community, you know, this area, people know each other really well. And so on one hand, people will look to the left and say, hey, you did this, so I want to bring you in to do this too. And for all intents and purposes, it's the same. But I've had this theory about it for a while, and it's finally just said I got to stop because I said two things can't exist in the same space. And it isn't, there's only so much space within a container, and I either need another container or I can't do the thing. And a lot of times what I was trying to do is go, yeah, sure. And I just, they just can't exist in the same space. And it's either get a bigger container. I'm not so sure I want a bigger container. I don't want to just keep getting bigger.
Why not?
It's
don't like to do things halfway. And I find that if I take on too many things, that's what has to happen because I don't have time to do everything.
Yeah.
So as I've gotten older, I've decided that, somebody else that's better at it can do it, maybe. And now if it's something only I can do, I'm probably going to do it. But it says, where are you currently saying yes in your life when you really should say no? I would have to say I'm like a social media aholic. Probably because I do all the social media for Families Helping Families, and I have another venture that I'm doing social media for. Yeah. And I saw there's something on ABC tomorrow night called Screen Time, talking about how much screen time. So I'm going to watch that and see if I can't put it down or make some time away.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say I'm an aholic. I actually got off 3 years ago. I got completely off.
Wow.
Except I did have to keep I kept the accounts.
Yeah, you have to.
Because we do social media for clients. So I had to still manage their social media. But for that period of time, the only person I was connected to was my mother. That was it. That was my only one social, because she stayed on social media and I still wanted that line in to be able to see what she was posting.
That was why I got on social media, to follow my kids.
Right.
See what they were doing.
And so I guess I say all that to mean that coming back into it, though, I was way more conscious than before. Because before it was, oh, everybody's doing this. This is sort of a new thing. And it was kind of, to be honest, it was a little fun at first. But then something turned sour with it for me. I don't know what happened, but it went to seed pretty bad. And I said, okay, I'm just got to pull out of this. Coming back in with intent was totally different. And it's like, I think we were talking about this off pod. I started having conscious thoughts about it. And I said, well, maybe instead of just being a victim of social media, I can be a signal inside of it, right? And so what's my signal? What's my signal versus noise ratio? And so then it was different. I just wasn't consuming it as much.
Right.
But now I do. I consume it, and I don't feel guilty about it because I've now tuned the dial to go, hey, I like this. I like what this person's saying, even if it's in opposition, or even if we don't agree. Sometimes I listen. I was talking about this with another guest. I'd say I have liberal leanings more than I would say conservative leanings. I don't really even like the words because sometimes I find I'm really conservative about something, whatever it may be, but it might be that one thing. But I'll go listen to someone in a hyper-conservative camp that's not really venomous. They just have real conservative views because I like to hear what they have to say. And every once in a while, I'll go, hey, they presented information I didn't have. So I'll go research the information and go, I won't say I'm in 100% alignment, but I might actually kind of adopt that because I agree with parts of what they're saying. What I find on social media, though, now is just very polarized. It's either one or the other, and I'm just not that way. I just go, look, I have to apply it. I want to test it. I think even Buddha said that. It was put it to the test, boil it, see what impurities pour out and if there's actually gold in it. So I guess that's a really long answer, but yeah, I think
there's gold in social media. I think there is some. I think you have to work hard to mine it.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I think that's what I need to work on, mining that gold a little bit better. Yeah. But I have found some tools that will, because I do a lot of posting for work, so I have found some tools that help me post so I don't have to do it. Yeah. Actually, it schedules the posts.
Yeah, right. That helps take a lot of the pressure off.
So you can do other stuff.
I had a really kind of a side effect blessing. One of my clients is in the medical field, and I do their social media. So I do all the research about what they're going to put out there, all the information and everything. They don't have time to do it. That's what they've hired us to do. Yeah. And on one hand, I'm not a super big fan of that. I like that voice inside of a brand. I like to know that there's an actual person behind it and who I'm kind of interacting with. But on this one, the side effect for me was in having to do that research week after week, I'm exposed to tons of health information, exercise, diet. And so after all this year or two of doing this, I can honestly say I've added many things. It's like helped me learn to form new habits. I'm not saying I'm done, but every time I get new information, I'm like, hey, I could do this. I'm in the category. I'm in the audience. So it's been kind of a side effect in a way, I guess.
That's a good side effect.
Yeah. Sometimes I guess for a long time I think I got jaded against it. I just needed to change the channel.
Yeah, there you go.
That's all I need to do.
There you go.
Yeah, well, let's dig in the bowl again.
I gotta do it again.
You gotta do it again 3 times.
Gosh, well, that's just wrong. Let's see. I put on my glasses again. I took them off. I keep getting the same kind of cards. Which character from a book or movie would you most like to meet and why? Oh, wow. Fictional?
It doesn't matter, I don't think.
This is funny. People are going to laugh at me. Rick from The Walking Dead.
Really? Why?
I just like Rick. I like his character. I like that. I love the Rick Tatership.
Oh,
Any of the Walking Dead fans will know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
He's a strong character. He has to do all kinds of stuff he doesn't want to do. He hates it. He's not that kind of person, but he just does it.
Interesting.
And he gets it done.
Do you find an appeal to that? Somebody that just says, look, I don't want to have to do this, but I'm going to do it.
I have to. Yeah. I'm not. I'd like to be more like that, I think. I don't know that I am, but
sometimes it's nice to have a figure in life around you that is like that, because you can take it off. I know for me, I've had not Rick, but I mean you're in that role sometimes too, where I'm sure you have to make decisions that you go, I got to do what's best.
That's right.
Even though
I don't necessarily agree with it, maybe.
So that's a difficult position, and the stress that comes with it, because if you're really worried about everybody involved in a situation, that's tough. And like Rick's character,
and I just want to hear him say Carl. All you Walking Dead people know what I'm talking about.
That's funny. No, that's a good answer.
I mean, really, I could have said Jesus.
Have you read the comic books?
Rick. No.
You would actually probably enjoy them. They're really good.
My son tells me all about him. He hasn't read them, but he's like a YouTube nut, and he watches all these different YouTube videos about like stuff like that where they predict.
Like who's gonna?
Yes,
what's gonna happen.
So he knows about them, but I don't believe he's read them. But somebody else asked me that. I might have to.
You probably would if you do like Rick. The comic book version of Rick is similar. I mean, I would say they're close. I mean, they're the same character, but there's definitely you get a. He was why I read the books. The character in the comic, I was like, man, he is. I was the same thing. I was like, how much can one person take is what I kept going. This character keeps going through some of the worst things and still has to lead. And what I love in the books is because he crashes and burns a lot of times, and you got to rebuild himself back up and take over. I find a lot of interest in that too.
And then I guess Negan would be the next one.
That's another interesting character.
Sorry. All right, third one. Guiding principle for your life and career. Oh, that's so easy. Awesome. An easy question. There's no separate Walmarts. There's no separate Walmarts. Everybody with a disability, without a disability, we all shop in the same place. We all have to learn how to live together, and whether or not you watch the people of Walmart or not is, people with disabilities, we all live in the same community. There should not be any separate places.
Man, that is interesting. I'm going to take that away from this conversation. When you said that, I went, oh my gosh, yes, I love that. There's no separate Walmarts.
Yeah, we've been saying that for years. Years and years.
Yeah.
Because that's where everybody goes. Everybody goes to Walmart.
Everybody eventually goes there, and there's no separate one for anybody.
That's right. We all have to learn how to get along together, live together, help each other, lift up the wheelchair, put it in the back seat, cut the sandwich if you need to, step out of the way, you know. Give somebody 50 cents if they need it, pay for their coffee, something, help each other.
Yeah, I think I like that because it just makes me think of survival of the fittest. Sometimes I think when we look at nature and we see animals and we go, oh, it's survival of the fittest. Nature's red in tooth and claw, and we adopt that and apply it to human beings. I don't know. I go, shouldn't we? I mean, we have so many gifts. We have all these abilities, and we're such a different type of animal. Why do we have to do that?
And why should we?
And why should we? If an apple's too high and I'm the tallest animal, golly, I could say that's mine, survival of the fittest, or I could go, hey man, here you go.
Because there's another one up there you can get.
That's right.
That's right. Everybody
so
can
why
share.
not? But I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, because I do see that sentiment out in the world. I don't like to focus on it, but it's out there for sure. It's like, hey.
But we have such wonderful technology now. People that use ventilators every day, and they live their lives. And people that use assistive technology to speak, to walk, to do everything. I mean, why not?
Yeah. What's hard about it?
It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be hard to get sometimes, and we can, we might have to work to get that done, but it's not, it shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, but I think overall, what's hard about just taking an attitude of just saying, I'm just going to be helpful.
Right.
I think there's a fear, and I don't know. I'm just basing this on what I think. And who the heck am I? I don't know. I mean, I just think sometimes there's a fear that if you help, let's say somebody needs help and 20 people have passed them by and they haven't gotten any help, and then you say, hey, I'm going to help. There's a fear that if you decide to help, then you got to go, then you're going all in, and you may not have that capacity, right? You can help in that moment, but somebody might need a lot more help, and it's like, oh, if I'm in, then I'm committing myself. And so instead of doing the action of help, it's like, I'm just not doing anything. I'm gonna keep going, and somebody else can do that. And I think, and I might be wrong, but I do think that's probably out there. There's probably a fear like that.
Sure.
It's like, I don't know. I don't need to get into that.
And maybe we could take the direction of, let's help, and let's figure out who else can help you too, and let's figure out how to get you to help yourself.
Yeah.
To teach you how to do that, because in the future you might need that help again, and we want you to be able to know where to go and what to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm connected through this show. I'm connected to so many people now that are doing that type of thing. Look, what I tell you, fire trucks and stuff, there's not an episode that doesn't have a fire truck. It's not Find the Good News if the Sulphur Fire Department isn't represented in the audio. But no, that's true. I mean, everybody who's been on the show seems to have that attitude of working together. Oh, we're getting the horns today.
Yay!
Getting the horns. They're just glad you're here.
Yeah.
Well, it's raining too. I thought maybe.
Where's the ticker tape?
Right.
Where's the parade?
What's next? No, but the people that have come on the show seem to all sort of have that attitude of pooling people together and saying, "Hey, I'm whoever the individual may be. They may be the rallying point, and they're going to take an action, but they're very good about pulling other people in and going, hey, can somebody help? Can somebody do?
Because you can't do it all yourself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, everybody.
That's what we could all work together though.
Yeah.
To get it done.
Right. Well,
better together.
Better together. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. So how do people get in touch with you and Families Helping Families if they've heard this podcast and they go, hey, I'm interested. I think I can.
You can find us on Facebook. Look for Families Helping Families in Southwest Louisiana. You can call 337-436-2570. You can email at info@fhfswla.org. You can show up on our doorstep. We're usually open 9 to 4 are our posted hours, but lots of times you're going to find somebody there before or after. 2927 Hodges in Lake Charles, kind of midtown, not downtown, middle between Alamo and Prien Lake Road. Call us. We'll see what we can do and help you figure out where you are and what you might need and what resources are out there, and listen to you and support you as much as we can.
That's what it's all about, being a helper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're helpers.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoy it.
And I love you just as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Find the Good News. If you would like to advertise on this show or sponsor an episode, just visit findthegood.news. Send me a message and we'll see about getting your business, organization, service, product, or event on the show. I deeply thank each of you again for supporting this podcast.